What's going on, everybody? It's Chris from Profoto USA, and today I'm going to walk you through how to set up and use the Profoto TTL-S for Sony. The reason that we're going to do this one is because I did it a long time ago, and I did it when I was first starting, and I had my just doing it with my cell phone, and it's a little bit shaky. And like I said, a lot of the times I want this to be a reference for people whenever you are, maybe just getting into the system and trying to figure out what's going on, or if you're trying to troubleshoot and see what's going on. The Sony is probably the most complex as far as setup goes whenever you're getting the air remote rocking and rolling with the actual camera itself. So I'm going to show you today. I've got just so you can see it, I've got an A7R2. It's just the camera that I have. I don't have one of the fancy new 3s, but so I've got an A7R2. I'm going to show you inside the menu settings what you'll do there. The A7 3s and the R3s are a little bit different, but they're not. But the same rules will still apply to it. So I've got my GoPro set up right here, so you guys are going to be able to see up close and personal what things look like and the things that you need to pay attention to as you're getting that set up. So I'm going to see what's going on with you guys. Hey, what's up, everybody? Kelly Chanel in the house. What's up? Happy Friday. Alex, Horatio, what's going on? Roberto, Jacob, good to see you guys. Awesome. So let's get right into it. So, like I said, with the Sony, it's a little more complex than most of the other camera systems just because there's a lot of settings that you want to make sure that are correct. So the most important thing that you can do, and it is absolutely integral to getting this working, is making sure that your firmware is 100% up to date. So we made the air remote with Sony. So Sony actually provided us the actual TTL codes that are inside the air remote. So we didn't have to, like with our Canons and our Nikons, we had to reverse engineer and kind of figure out what the TTL codes were. So that's why you see a lot more firmware push outs, I guess, for it, firmware updates that that fix like tweak bugs and stuff like that. With the Sony, for the most part, we've had one firmware update, which was A3, and that was because Sony wanted to change the way that high-speed sync worked. Other than that, we've never had to do an update because, like I said, fortunately, we built this remote with Sony. We've done the same thing with Fuji and Olympus. So those three companies we've built the air remotes with. So we have really, really awesome working relationships with them. So because of that, firmware, most important thing you can do, update your firmware, camera, air remote, flash. If one of those things is off, something's going to act kooky. It's the nature of the beast. So that is the most important thing that you can do. I cannot stress it enough. So if you want to go into your camera, so we'll flip over here to the GoPro, and let's get you guys down here. So if you're going into your camera menu, the one thing that a lot of people don't like about Sony's is just they're really menu latent. So if I go here under the toolbox and area number 6, I can go down here and check my version. And I'm running version 4. I know I'm running the latest version on this thing, so we're good to go there. So that's one of the very first things you want to do. The next thing you want to do is if you need to check and see what firmware you're actually using on the air remote. And the easiest way to check the version of your firmware on your air remote is you go here to the top right corner of your TTL on your manual button. You're going to hold that down for about 5 seconds. And so after a couple seconds, you're going to see hello pop up. And when you release it, you're going to see a letter and a number. A3 is the latest firmware on the Sony system, so we know that we are rocking and rolling with the air remote as far as firmware goes. So then you can just let it time itself back out, or you could hit a button and it jumps back out. So cool. So that's one of the first things you want to do is make sure, once again, camera, your TTL remote, and your flash all up to date. The next things you're going to want to get into are a couple of settings inside the camera that are pretty pertinent. So with your Sony cameras, you want to make sure that your flash mode is set to wireless. That way you're actually transmitting information from the pins through the pins of the Sony hot shoe to the air remote, and then you're shooting out information to it. So you want to go into the menu system. So let me back this GoPro up so you guys can see. So on the A7R2, you would go right here to your different modes, wireless and all that good stuff, and then boom, sit wireless, and you're rocking and rolling. So once wireless is set up, that's the first thing you want to do. The second thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is that you are not using silent shoot mode. So what silent shoot mode does is it's actually going to deactivate your hot shoe on your camera. So it's a really, really important thing to make sure that you don't have turned off. So if you go into here, into the menu, once again, the only rough thing about this stuff is that it's menu laden. So silent shooting right here, off. Very, very important. Silent shoot mode has to be off. You also want to make sure that you're not shooting with, if you have silent shoot mode turned off, but you're still shooting with the mechanical, if you have the silent shoot turned off, but you're still shooting with the electronic shutter, once again, that electronic shutter does not trigger the hot shoe. It just does, it's a rolling shutter. So it's not actually sending that mechanical shutter information to the hot shoe, so it's not gonna fire it. So you're gonna wanna make sure that silent shoot mode is off and that you are using the mechanical shutter in the camera. So those are integral. So if all that's good, what you should see on the air remote is this right here. In the sync window, you should see the word first pop up. If you're not, if the camera, and you'll see this, I'm gonna turn the camera off and everything should disappear out of the sync window after a second. So there. So if you see your air remote and it looks like that with nothing in the sync window, then that means that your camera and your air remote are not communicating. So it will still fire manually, so you can put it in there and it's not in, you don't have first in that window, it will still trigger. So don't be confused by the fact that it'll still trigger. You're still using it as a manual trigger at that point, and it'll work all the way up to your camera's curtain sync, but you won't have high-speed sync. So you want to make sure, most important thing, is that that says first on it. So with the A7R2, for example, we had some issues where there seemed to be a coating on the pins of the camera. And so what we would have to do is we would have to uninstall the air remote and reinstall it a couple times, just to kind of scratch the pins against one another to kind of get rid of that, whatever that little coating was. And that always seemed to help fix that if you were having some problems with that. Another issue that we found is sometimes the pins in the shoe of the camera aren't making great contact. So what you can do is you can give it a little bit of a twist. So flip back over to this thing. I'm communicating perfectly fine. So when I turn my camera back on, I've got first in the window. But what you can do sometimes is you can kind of pivot the air remote just a little bit. And that seems to fix that issue for a lot of people. It's just to make sure that those pins are completely set in there. So once again, you could try uninstalling it, reinstalling it, but first curtain is the most important thing that you can see in that sync window. Sorry that I just moved the stool all over the place. So the next thing that kind of always throws people for a little bit of a loop with the TTL-S is that you don't ever see, like on the other air remotes, when you flip over into high-speed sync, it doesn't just flip over to high-speed sync and stay there. It's the TTL-S remote and the way that Sony wanted the system designed. This is actually one of the things that they wanted. This is why we went from version A2 to version A3 with our firmware, because they changed this one little thing. So what happens is you're in high-speed sync for the moment that you fire the flash, and then the moment you fire the camera, and when the exposure's over with, it flips back into first curtain sync. Originally, when I first saw this, it didn't make a ton of sense to me, but then I started thinking about it a little bit more, and the cool thing about this actual setup with Sony is, and this was more of an issue before we had full range high-speed sync, but now what was really, really cool is if you had two shooters taking photos, say at a wedding reception or something, and one person wanted to be in high-speed sync and the other person didn't want to be in high-speed sync, you would always run into a problem where the camera that's in high-speed sync is going to override and just put the flashes in high-speed sync mode. So the cool thing about the Sony one is that it's only in high-speed sync for the moment that it fires. So if you see first curtain in that front window, you can rest assured that your camera is talking to the air remote. So now, if I take this camera and I speed up the shutter speed to, let's just go to 500. So right now you can see that it still says first in the window, but as soon as I hit the trigger, boom, jumps over to high-speed sync and jumps right back out. So once again, let me do that again. So I'm at 1/500th of a second. If I press down the shutter, it jumps to high-speed sync and it jumps back. So that's the way that you're going to actually check to see if your high-speed sync's working if you think that you're having issues. For the most part, though, once again, as long as first curtain is illuminated inside your sync window on the air remote, you're good to go. That's the most important thing besides firmware, is that first is there. And then TTL manual mode, none of that stuff matters. Your high-speed sync will trip into place and stuff like that. So let me see if you guys have any questions. Kelly, you are a Fuji shooter. Back to editing. I'm a Fuji shooter myself too. how do we work with Pocket Wizard? So Pocket Wizard, it depends on the flash that you're using. Some of our flashes have the ability to use Pocket Wizard stuff, the other ones don't. Simply, a Pocket Wizard is just a trigger. So you just put a Pocket Wizard on top of your camera, plug a Pocket Wizard into a Profoto flash, and you're good to go. So it's working with the Pocket Wizard is really not that complicated. So just plug the Pocket Wizard into the flash, put it on top of your camera, you're good to go. And you can even do that with the, if you wanted to go that route with like the +4s, and the, if I'm not mistaken, you can use a +4 and put an A1 on top of it and trigger an A1. I could be mistaken, I've never used a +4, but from everything that I've read, you can do it. So let's see if you guys have any other questions. Like I said, this is just a really, really easy live today. It's just I wanted to make sure that this information was alive on Facebook and YouTube in a little bit better production quality way so people can come back and reference it. So once again, the things that you want to pay attention to is that your camera firmware is up to date, remote firmware is up to date, flash firmware is up to date. The most important things. You want to make sure that you're in wireless as far as your flash setting goes, and you want to make sure that you are not in silent shoot mode and that you are using your mechanical shutter. Those are the points that you need to hit. First should appear in that sync window on your Air TTL-S remote. If you're not, give it a little bit of a twist just to kind of make sure that those pins are touching, or uninstall it and reinstall it, just make sure those pins are touching, and you should be good to go. From there on, you'll be able to ramp up into your high-speed syncs and do everything else that you want to do. The beautiful thing is the TTL works really, really good with the Sonys and the Profoto stuff because we had that relationship where we built the Air remote with one another. So they're an awesome company. They make amazing cameras, obviously, and it's really, really cool that we have a relationship with them. So I don't think I see any other Sonia, I know that you're still waiting for the A1 for Sony. We're getting close. I think we're getting close. It feels like we're getting close. Hypersync, Lenny, I don't know a ton about Hypersync personally. I know how the technology works, but the Hypersync Profoto stuff, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I think you can use the Pocket Wizard stuff to do that. It's not a technology that we like just because it doesn't give you a consistent exposure. It can tend to leave your exposure gradiated because all you're doing is really long flash duration that tapers off, and a lot of the times you can catch that taper and it starts to get a little bit darker on one side of your frame. So nice thing about Hypersync is it uses a ton of power, which is cool, but I'm not as well versed in how you make Hypersync stuff work on Profoto. I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you, Lenny. I apologize. Joel, yeah, you will see me at Shutterfest. So if any of you guys are going to be at Shutterfest next week, I'll be there. My buddy Cliff will be there, and we have a bunch of rad people that are going to be there. What's your hat? Cleveland Indians, AA. Moses, how dare you? It's the Atlanta Braves because, yeah. Although we're playing the Indians today. Enough baseball talk, but it's the Atlanta Braves. It's just the old school A from the 70s. I think it's a batting practice hat. Actually, it's got a Florida logo on the side, so it's actually a spring training cap, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Good morning from Mexico. Everybody's in the house. This is awesome. Enrique from Maryland. So cool. So like I said, this just wanted to make sure that we have this reference for people who are going to be or thinking about switching to Sony, or maybe just jumping into the Profoto world. I want to make sure that this reference is here for you to make sure that you can get that thing set up. Thank you guys so much. Moses, I'm just messing with you, man. You don't have to be sorry. And Eric, not go Reds ever. But thank you guys so much. It means the world to me that you come and hang out with me on Fridays and do this. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more stuff. Please send me messages. Tell me what you want to see. I've got more stuff in the pipeline, but I will absolutely love to cover any topic that you'd like to have covered. So please drop me something in the messages. Shoot me a message directly. You can shoot us an email to info- what is it? It's us-info@profoto.com, and they will forward that email right over to me, and I will add all of that stuff to my docket. So please shoot me your questions, your comments. I'd love to cover all the kind of stuff that you want to, because this is for you. I enjoy doing this, but mostly I enjoy doing this for you out there. So thank you so much again for hanging out with me. I really, really appreciate it, and we will see you next Friday. Yes, have a good one.